you. So I just handed out a hard copy of something that I think I've made available to you. If I haven't, I will, also on Canvas, so that you can make other copies if you want to. This is going to be the list of the bones that you'll be responsible for, and after we spend the next 10 days or so, week at least, week or 10 days, with these bones in lab. So you'll see, and you might not like the arrangement of this, depending on how you like to learn. So if I were you all, and again, you're kind of seeing wherever the little picture is, but you're maybe kind of seeing this list of bones that I handed out. Anybody who's not here will get it. You might want to do just separate little things, like with the skull. If you notice on this, the skull, the cranium, the skull, I've got those bones listed there, right? That's just the skull. And then, you know, I've got them kind of separated as far as like regions and parts. Some of you might have a really strong background in the names of these bones because you either had them in high school or whatever, but some of these might be, some of you might, this might be really new to you, the names of these bones. But here's some recommendations that have been shown to be really effective as far as studying these. You take one region at a time, and you do not worry about any of the other regions until you get that one region at a time. What I have found is that most students, it's the skull that's they're least familiar with, the names of the skull bones. So I've got colored skulls that we have that we can study. So each of these bones are different colors. That can help you, right? You could actually go online, or you could draw yourself. I had a student who did all of her own artwork, but she drew each of these bones that she had to learn and had them separated by regions and studied them that way. But the thing is, to start now, you can't wait. Again, not paper clip. Can't wait until the day or two before, or you're not going to get these. So try to spend just a few minutes each day looking at one region at a time until you get that region so well you will own it, you will take it to your grave, you understand? And then once you have that region, then take a look at the next region, right? Learn that one, then go back and review the first one, review that one, then go to your next region. But take it a little bit at a time. We don't learn if we try to study for long periods at a time. We should take mini breaks and time manage to the point that you are looking at it a little bit each day. Fair enough? Now, again, what I'd like to bring to your attention on my list, which I know is not a great way to have these written, but I want you to pay attention to something that I think it will make sense once I show you this. If we look at the cranial bones, the bones in the skull, we see the frontal, right? This is the frontal. And the occipital is this bone back here, you know, where my hand is. It's the occipital bone. But then you'll see after the name of some bones, you'll see parentheses with some names in there. That means if it's a parentheses after a bone, it means regions on that bone. So for the occipital bone, I have 3 different regions of this bone I want you to know. Is that right? I want you to know the foramen magnum, the occipital condyles, and the occipital protuberance, right? So if something's in a parentheses, it's a region on the bone that was preceding the parentheses. Fair enough? Is that fair enough? Now, here's the thing. You all will probably need lots of different pictures from it. None of the, by the way, I haven't given you a region to know on a bone that isn't in your textbook that you can find pictures for it. All right? All right, now that I've told you what's in the parentheses, I want you to know this. The first thing you should do is get the names of the bones. So another recommendation is that maybe you just ignore the parentheses for now and learn the names of the bones first, all right? By the way, I'm giving you this way in advance. We're going to talk about all of these in class, and we're going to spend a lot of time on each of these regions in lab, right? So I didn't give this to y'all just to freak you out. I gave this to you as just a heads up, right? That you can start yourself with this a little bit if you wanted to, but we're going to talk about all of these. Now, today we actually begin, we are starting our study of, is this recording? This is recording. I just don't know why it's up. Okay, so we're going to start our study of bones. So the skeletal system, it's an organ system. It's an organ system, right? I know that you guys probably aren't going to be looking at this until I've been tested on genetics, histology, and the skin, but you do need to be taking your notes, like you're going to be prepared for a lecture quiz Thursday. Is there going to be a lecture quiz on bones? No. But take your notes like there will, because will there be soon after Thursday? Yes. Okay. So anyway, you want to really be taking good notes here. And when we think about bone, we're going to take a look at how bone develops. We're going to look at what bone's made of, right? And we certainly are going to look at the functions of bone. And then because of that, once we learn normal functions, we'll even take a look at some of the bone disorders. Sorry about that title being in there. But when we think about bone, we need to realize that it is a living, dynamic tissue. So it's a living, dynamic tissue that just happens to have connective tissue, isn't it? It just happens to have a lot of extracellular matrix that's crystallized. So that crystallized extracellular matrix makes it appear to be really hard and give it the consistency that it has. Is that right? You know, so sometimes people, I think, have a hard time getting their head around that bone is a living tissue, but it is. That means it's got to have blood supply. It's got to have a healthy blood supply. It also has got nerve supply. Has anybody ever broken a bone in here? How many of you have broken bones, right? You know, I've never broken a bone, but from what I understand, it's painful. Is that right? Okay, so we do understand that when we just look at the bone itself, yes, it is connective tissue. It's in that category. But we understand there are other tissues that are supporting the skeletal system and making up the skeletal system. So when we think about functions, we come in here and we already know about a lot of functions. We know it's supporting, right, and that it's protecting. We know that our skull protects our brain. We know that our vertebral column protects our spinal cord. We know that our ribs and sternum protect our thoracic organs, right? So our lungs and our heart and the glands that are there. We know that our pelvic girdle region, the os coxae, are protecting our pelvic organs. Is that correct? So we know about protection. We've even talked about that if you have skeletal muscle attached to two bones, that when the muscle contracts, it acts on the bone, an acting bone, right? And you get what? So without this bone, would we even have movement? No. So we wouldn't even have movement. Now, what you might not have known, and this is what is going to be good for you to make sure you do know, is that inside of bone, we have in the marrow of bone, the red bone marrow. We have two different marrows, red bone marrow and yellow marrow. In the red bone marrow is where we find the stem cells. Everybody know what a stem cell is? Sure enough, y'all know those are early undifferentiated cells that have the potential to become anything. But the stem cells we find in red bone marrow are the cells that will become our blood cells. Name some blood cells for me. Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, right? Plasma's the liquid part of blood. But the cellular part of blood, those stem cells are found in our red bone marrow. Okay, fair enough? And then I want to talk to you about something that you might not have thought about, which might arguably, all those things we talked about are important, aren't they, for your health? But something that you might not have thought about, you might not know about yet, because you knew about all those things coming in, but something that you might not is that your skeletal system is a mineral reservoir. And I want to explain to you what that means. You ready? All right, and this is important that you get this. I told you that your bones are living dynamic tissue. The bones that you're sitting in now will be different osteocytes 9 months from now. That's kind of weird to think about. It's really a bizarre kind of weird thing to think about. Osseous or osteo is a prefix that means what? Bone. It means bone. Osteocytes are bone cells. See, there's no such thing as big words, are there? Osteocytes. Okay, osteoblasts would be early bone cells. See, y'all are playing this game so well now. I'm loving this. Okay, so great. So we understand that bone, if it's a living dynamic tissue, it means that we have the ability to build bone all throughout our life, don't we? But certainly it's going to take, what nutrients that we need to build it. If our nutrients are depleted, then are we going to be able to build good bone? No, so everything's got to be just right for us to build good bone, right? But it also means we can't just continue to build bone throughout our life unless we have the ability to do what? I mean, if we kept building bone throughout our life, we'd be a big old, huge, old, heavy, bony mess, right? So we have to have the ability to also tear down bone. Would that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. All right, so before I start talking to you about your bone being a mineral reservoir, really, it's where we can store and stock minerals. I need to talk to you about what bone is made of, all right? So when we think about bone cells, osteocytes, what I want you to know is that bone is one third, 0.33%, I guess you'd say, 33%. It's 1/3 organic matter. The pen is not writing where I am, and it's freaking me out. But it's 1/3 organic. Now, I told y'all organic chemistry is all about those big old macromolecules like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins. Didn't I tell you that that's organic chemistry? And then bone is 2/3 something else. What would you think? What would you think? Inorganic. Okay, 2/3 inorganic. So let me say this about this ratio, because it's just a ratio, isn't it? It's just a ratio of what bones should be. But by the way, that ratio will be important that it's balanced. Right. Okay, we're going to see why in a second. So when we think about organic, we think about those complexes like carbs, proteins, lipids. We think about those heavy macromolecules we talked about. Inorganic, let me tell you, the 2/3 are calcium complexes. Calcium complexes, like calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate. And let me tell you about these calcium complexes. They are crystallized. These calcium complexes. They're hard materials. Calcium carbonates, calcium phosphates, and these calcium inorganic complexes that are hard and crystallized. So just looking at the ratio, can we see why bone has the appearance it has? Yes. It has this hardened kind of appearance. What would happen, do you think, if all of a sudden, instead of 1/3 organic and 2/3 inorganic, this hardened crystallized complex, if all of a sudden it was like 50-50? Because 50-50 sounds good to me, right? That's pretty close, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If it didn't have enough of this, what do you think the bone would look like? It would be softer. And then could it be as structural support as it would be if it were softer? It needs to be just right. But wait a minute. So if it needs to be really hard, then it would be okay if all of a sudden it was 3/4 inorganic and 1/4 organic, right? Wrong, because it can't be what? Because then it would be brittle. Do you get it? Do y'all understand that this ratio has to be just right? If it's too much inorganic, it's going to be brittle and it will break easier. If it's too much organic, it will be soft too soft, and it won't be able to support. Do you get that? This is important, that when you are making bone cells, when stem cells become osteoblasts and osteoblasts become osteocytes, is this ratio important? It's very important. Because diseases occur when this ratio is off. Y'all have probably all heard of brittle bone disease, haven't you? And what do you know that when the bone is being made, what is there too much of? You've probably heard of people having soft, where they'll have bones that aren't forming because they're too soft. And when that happens, then we know that it's too much organic. You need to have just the right amount of organic because it gives tensile strength. It means the bone won't shatter. If it's 1/3 organic, the bone can withstand a ton of pressure. It's called tensile strength. It's just referred to as tensile strength. I don't ever ask you that. I just want you to know. It means it has a little bit of give before it'll crack. Where if it's too much inorganic, it'll be brittle. Right? So wow, our entire lives, we're building these cells that have to have just the right amount of this mixture, just the right recipe, or there might be bone disease. Fair enough? All right. Now, I told you a little bit about what the predominant structure of bone is. The predominant structure, or what kind of complexes? Calcium complexes. So y'all evolved from elementary school, from kindergarten, you learned that you needed calcium for strong bones and teeth, didn't you? You needed calcium for that. And now you see why, because it is mostly calcium complexes, right? All right, so here's what I want y'all to write down. I want y'all to write down about calcium homeostasis. Calcium homeostasis. Do we have a set point for calcium bloodstream? And this is blood calcium levels. Do we have a set point we'd like to have for blood calcium? Do we? All right, we have a set point. And we have a high normal, and we have a low normal. Now these are normals, but we don't want to get too much, because we understand homeostasis, and we understand to stay in homeostasis, what kind of feedback is that required? Negative feedback. So we understand that somehow blood calcium levels, when it gets too high, we have a way to bring it down. But when it gets too low, do we have a way to bring it back up? Yes. So y'all understand. You understand that that's how the body stays in a state of balance, a state of health, a state of well-being, a state of homeostasis. Okay? Now, calcium, blood calcium. Levels being in state of homeostasis. Let me suggest something to you that you might not have known. Blood calcium is important for strong bones and teeth. That's true. That's so true. But let me tell you why blood calcium levels being in homeostasis are so important to you today. Because if they get off today, you exit the world today. If they get too high today or too low today, it won't be compatible with life. These balances are one of the few balances in the body that your body can't withstand crazy levels. You've got to stay in homeostasis. And let me tell you why. Blood calcium levels must be maintained for nerve communication. Nerve communication. Oh, wait a minute. What system keeps us in all homeostasis? The nervous system. So if I ended it right there, would that be enough reason for you to understand that a patient's blood calcium levels better be in the right range? Yeah. Because nerve communication. But there's more than that. The second thing is that blood calcium levels have to be maintained for proper muscle physiology function. Muscle. Wait a minute. What's a muscle? The heart. But also, how about the larynx? Is that a muscle? If the larynx starts to contract, the diaphragm starts to contract, guess what's not moving? Air is not moving. That's exactly right. So you'd be thinking about that. Muscle contractions. And here's the third thing. Blood clotting. Proper blood clotting. Do we bleed every day? Are we stumping our toes? Are we blowing our noses too hard? Are we bleeding every day? That doesn't mean we see blood every day. But we are bleeding every day from injuries. But why don't we see blood flowing? Because we have proper what? Because we have proper calcium that's allowing for proper what? Blood clotting. Effective blood clotting. So you're telling me somebody in the prime of their life, like Aronson right there, could go out of blood calcium homeostasis today and she could be dead in your ER tonight? Are you serious? Just because of blood? But her thick bones and her teeth in the coffin would be perfect. What are you talking about? It's because there's other things are dependent on blood calcium levels being balanced. It's so important that your blood calcium levels be in homeostasis that you have an entire organism, organ system, the skeletal system that's helping you to keep it in homeostasis. It's the skeletal system. Listen to how. You ready? You ready for this? I love Nicole's expression. Okay, so you've got blood calcium levels and they're starting to go up like they do every day. They'll start to go up. But that's okay because what system do we have that's detecting when they go up? The nervous system. Guess what the nervous system does when it detects stimuli? It communicates with something, doesn't it? It communicates. And what's it communicating? It's communicating in this case with the endocrine system. And this example of this one is going to be the thyroid gland. This is just one of the ways, but the thyroid gland. And guess what the thyroid gland is going to release? A hormone. It's called calcitonin. Calcitonin. Can you all read that? Calcitonin. Calcitonin. You think that hormone's just going to sit around, or do you think it's going to target something? I think it's going to, like all hormones, it's going to target something, and what it targets is something called osteoblast. What did y'all say a blast is? It really targets a stem cell that ends up becoming an osteoblast. Would you say a blast is? It's an early cell. In this case, it's an early what cell? Early bone cell. Would you say bone is made of? Calcium. And so what is it going to need to make this osteoblast? Where is it going to get calcium from? The bloodstream. And to make osteoblast, as we're making osteoblasts turning into osteo what? Sites. What's happening to our blood calcium levels? Because we're making what? Bone. We're making bone. Calcium's going back down. Oh, but wait a minute. Now it's getting a little low. That's okay, because what do we have? What do we have? To detect it. We have the nervous system to detect it. And guess what the nervous system's going to speak to? No, but that was a different endocrine gland. This endocrine gland, it's actually two glands, but this one's called the parathyroid glands, with four tiny little glands. But the parathyroid glands, they're endocrine glands, parathyroid glands, not to be confused with the thyroid. Thyroid's right here. It's the little parathyroids on the back of the thyroid gland, completely different glands. But it's also going to talk to the kidneys. So it's talking to two organs, the nervous system. That nervous system, I'm going to tell you something, it's bossy. Because what is it detected? What is it detected right here? It's detected that calcium levels are getting what? Low. Is it going to sit on the information? No. It's going to send a signal to the parathyroid glands that's going to release a hormone known as parathyroid hormone. That's parathyroid hormone. Don't make me write it all out, okay? Parathyroid hormone. Wait a minute. And the kidneys, do you think the kidneys are going to release something? Kidneys are going to release something too. They're going to release something called calcitriol. Calcitriol. And let me tell you, what do you think these two hormones are going to do to your blood calcium levels? Good guess. They're going to start raising it up. How do you think they do that? What did you say? That's exactly right. This is going to target, this parathyroid hormone is going to target something called the formation. Now, first they were stem cells, but then they become osteoclast. Osteoclast is a bone cell that releases hydrochloric acid. And when this thing is secreting hydrochloric acid, what's happening to the neighboring cells? You said the neighboring cells are really crystallized because the extracellular matrix is real crystal because of the calcium complexes. But I won't tell you something, I don't care how crystal they are, if there's hydrochloric acid near them, what are they doing? They're breaking down. When that bone is breaking down, what is going up in the bloodstream? Blood calcium level. Are you with me on this?
Could you just repeat that?
Yes. So it might just don't write for a second. Just everybody listen to this because I really kind of do want you to hear it. So as blood calcium levels start to get low, and we said we don't want hypocalcemia, do we? And we don't want hypercalcemia either. And that's just fancy ways of saying low blood calcium versus high blood calcium. But we said we don't want that because a lot of systems function is based on calcium levels being just right. The nervous system, the muscular system, and something called blood clots. Those are just, well, those are the few things that will take you out of this world today if blood calcium levels get wrong. So we have an entire organ system, the skeletal system, that helps to serve as a reservoir, as a storage site. Then we say that's a function of the skeletal system, to be a mineral reservoir. And we said that when blood calcium levels get too high, that's okay. We can just make what? Bone. And as we make bone, it's needing calcium from the bloodstream to make it, so blood calcium levels going down. Is that a good idea? Right? But then as it starts to get low, that's okay because we can go to bone and we can tear the bone down, which is what osteoclasts do. They're specialized bone cells that secrete hydrochloric acid. And as they're secreting hydrochloric acid, neighboring bones are dissolving. And as they're dissolving, what you say bone's mostly made of? Where's that calcium going? Into the bloodstream. What's happening to your blood calcium levels? It's increasing. Hey guys, can you see that this has to stay balanced though? Do you see you don't want osteoblasts outpacing osteoclasts? And just the other way, we don't want osteoclasts outpacing osteoblasts either, do we? We don't. We want them to be balanced. We want this to be a perfect balance. Because if one starts outpacing the other, will it affect your skeletal health? Yes. Because what's our major mineral reservoir for calcium? It's the skeletal system. Now it's also, I told you calcium complexes, didn't I? I told you that calcium phosphate, calcium carbonates, there's some calcium, but they're all crystal things and they're mostly calcium. But there's some other minerals in there too. And so we need those balanced. But this blood calcium levels are the ones that are so vital. Now, hypocalcemia. Y'all told me that would literally be broken down to mean what? Low calcium in the bloodstream. Then you say that's what hypocalcemia would be broken down to mean? Are we good with that? I want to tell you one of the serious immediate dangers of hypocalcemia is something called tetany. Tetany. Hypocalcemia, if it's too low blood calcium, you can get something called tetany. Tetany. Tetany means a sustained muscle contraction. Sustained muscle contraction. And, you know, you might be thinking, well, so somebody's just got, you know, a cramp or, you know, but it's not a cramp, folks. Sustained muscle contractions. what you'll notice is you can see this in any age group. What you can see it sometimes if somebody's severely dehydrated, or maybe they've had a GI issue for a while, or maybe I don't know. You can see it in a lot of different cases. But what they'll start doing is something called carpal tunnel syndrome, and they'll start retracting. Now, this is not the same as people who are bedridden will contract. People who are bedridden are contracting because they're not using their muscles, and the tendons are contracting over long periods of time. I'm talking about somebody healthy. So we got somebody healthy, and all of a sudden, this evening they're in their ER and they're kind of in a little fetal position. And do we tend to get in fetal positions to comfort ourselves? We do get in fetal positions to comfort ourselves. But if you have somebody in a fetal position that has come in and laying in their bed in the ER, and you see them in a fetal position, they're in a little fetal, make sure that you do go up and make sure they aren't really contracted. Like they aren't so tight that you can't pull like that, and I can't pull. Because that would mean they're in hypocalcemia. That means they've got sustained muscle contractions going. That means that if their larynx muscle starts to do, they're not going to be moving any air. You've got 4 minutes to get in a trach, right? Or their heart's going to start showing arrhythmias. They're going to have a hard time moving air. So you've got to get them some calcium in their bloodstream. Their EKG is going to be showing that. So you got to get them some calcium. And guess what's going to happen as soon as you start pushing a little calcium? It's just it'll take care of itself. But if you miss it, could they go into arrhythmias? Could they start having airway issues? Yeah, they could. So tetany is a sustained muscle contraction that is a sign that somebody might be hypocalcemic, right? Now, we said that calcium imbalances are going to affect how the nervous system is even communicating with each other. So depressed nervous system responses also might be your clue. Doing head-to-toe assessments where you are actually looking at somebody's reflexes and responses. Head-to-toe assessments are so valuable, and I'm afraid that people are kind of, not taking the time to do those. But doing head-to-toe assessments with reflex checks, these are important to do, right? So what I have just talked about here is why we think about our bone as being more than just protecting vital organs. So is that a very important thing to do? That's obviously a very important thing to do, and movement and structure and support, but also an incredibly important function is this mineral reservoir that they are. They are where we go and stock some of these minerals like calcium, phosphates, and whatever, and where we can go and get them when we need them. Is that right? Because we can build bone and we can break bone down. Now, as we age, the most common bone disease, and by the way, it is the most common bone disease anyway, it's called osteoporosis. Osteoporosis, and I do want you all to know about this. Osteoporosis, most common bone disease. And what does the name suggest to you that it is? That the bones, osteo means bone, and porosis means what? The bone is what? That it's kind of porous. It's porous. It's not where it should be. So what is happening in osteoporosis is that you're not getting the osteoblast activity where you need it to be. The osteoclast activity is outpacing it. And that's what causes osteoporosis. Now, let me tell you about osteoporosis being the most common bone disease. And please, please, whenever y'all hear about diseases that are typically thought of predominantly in one group, do not close your mind to other people having them. Because I have known middle age, when I say middle age, that's 40s, 50s, Black males having osteoporosis. Not for the same reasons that we think about the major group. The major group that we think about are small, older, white women. So you do want to know that. But every one of those features are explained by this. You ready for it? Every one of them. Now, do you think that calcitonin, calcitriol, and parathyroid hormones are the only hormones that affect bone health? No. No. There are 20 plus others that we know of that contribute to bone health. One of the major ones being estrogen. And what do we know about estrogen levels in older women? They've dropped. So we've got a drop in estrogen. So that explains the older, right? The white means that it's hereditary. There's a hereditary component to this. There is a hereditary component, right? The small means this, and I hadn't talked to you about this yet, but I want you to know this. Osteoblast activities aren't just initiated by calcitonin. There's something else that can push osteoblast activity. That is going to be mechanical pressure put on the bone. When mechanical pressure is put on bones, it encourages the bones to build new bone. In other words, you use it or you what? Lose it. So smaller white women, are they putting much mechanical pressure when they're flitting around? Sorry, they don't really flit. But it's not really much pressure. But if you're a bigger woman and you're even walking or you're doing stuff, is that putting pressure? Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. We hope we're all safe.
Yes, ma'am. You're very safe.
Okay. Well, good to see you.
Good seeing you. Have a good day.
Well, that would have been bad because you told us something else. That was my brother-in-law. So we saw one. I was like, what is he doing?
And he said no.
I know. If he said no, I was like, well, you don't look like you're in a hurry. So, okay. But anyway, putting pressure also on bones, because if you're putting pressure against bones, like even walking puts pressure on bones, doesn't it? So if you're walking is one of the best things you can do for bone health. But if you're really small, is that putting too much pressure on bones? So this is why they say walking is wonderful. But if you're really small and you're older and you don't have the estrogen levels you need, then probably you want to do some resistant weight things too. Even if it's something like they say holding cans of soup, while you're walking or doing something, because it's enough pressure, mechanical pressure, it encourages what? Osteoblasts to form. Whereas if you are idle and there's no pressure, what are they saying? That sitting is one of the worst things you can do, right? Or being idle. I'm not a dog. But anyway, then, one of these can output the osteoclasts can end up outpacing osteoblasts. And it can make the bones over time very porous. And then they lose their other functions. They're not able to support as well. So you end up seeing things like kyphosis, which is what people call the hunchback, right? So you see kyphosis. You'll end up seeing people breaking their hips. You hear about people falling and breaking their hips, the elderly. And is that really true? Is that really what's happening most of the time in that group I just talked about, elderly small white women? No. Their hip broke and it made them fall. A lot of times they don't even know that was the sequence, but their hip broke and they fell. And then, they come in and say, I fell. And did I break my hip? And they'll say, yeah, you broke your hip. But they don't tell you that your hip probably broke just from it was so porous, right? And that caused you to fall. If you look at the statistics in elderly people who have a broken hip, somebody would probably do that anyway, maybe before the next time we really talk about this. But if you look at the statistics of people making it 12 months out of a hip break, elderly, it's horrible. It's like less than a quarter alive in 12 months. So, the thing about that, so what that tells us is that we want to prevent that from happening, right? So it's a prevention thing. All right, so that looks crazy if anybody comes by and looks at that board, but do y'all get that board? Do y'all get what I was talking about right here? Okay, so hormones play a huge role. The nervous system is controlling homeostasis, blood calcium levels. And the way the nervous system does it is by talking to effectors, which are endocrine glands. Do you think you're going to have to know the thyroid releases a hormone called calcitonin that stimulates stem cells to become osteoblasts, that become mature cells called osteocytes, right? Do you think you're going to need to know the nervous system talks to the parathyroid gland to secrete parathyroid hormone, which also encourages osteoclasts to be formed that release what? Hydrochloric acid that dissolve bone, which means that blood calcium levels are rising. Calcitriol from the kidneys. Calcitriol is going to be released into the skin, and as long as you're, I don't mean you're laying in the sun, but as long as you have some even indirect exposure to sunlight, you'll be making vitamin D. And if you're making vitamin D, what does that help you to absorb into your system? Calcium. So this calcitriol, parathyroid hormone, both work together to raise blood calcium levels, right? Calcitonin lowers blood calcium levels. Calcium has to be, it's one of those, some things the body can manage variances outside of normals pretty well. Like phosphates, the body can handle crazy numbers, but the body cannot handle imbalances of calcium because nerves depend on it being just right, muscles depend on it being just right, and blood clotting depends on it being just right. Are you with me? All right, so the bones. This might be something you didn't know about bones coming in. We good? All right, so I think that's enough as our introduction to the bones today, because I know that y'all are going to put this away, the bone thing, and you're not going to really look at it until after Thursday. I understand that. But how do you feel? You have any questions for me about this so far? By the way, we're going to go to lab. And in lab, I'm going to get out, y'all can get out a scope on your own if you want to in lab. And you can look at all the slides again. But if you are doing that, make sure you are also coming and looking at my scope. Because I'm going to put a scope up with my slides that have the perfect fields of view. Where your slides you might be roaming around, right? And you might not be in a perfect field of view, which might confuse you a little. Let me tell you what else we're going to do in lab in a few minutes. I'm going to get out the colored skull. The colored skulls. You can take the skulls apart, but I don't want you to. Please don't. You can see every bone that I have on that cranial list, every bone in the skull. You can see it just by turning the skull upside, around, lateral, inferior. You can see them looking inside the nose, so you'll be able to see. And they're different colors, so it can really help you, right? So I'm going to get out some bones too. We have a human skeleton that's in there that we've had for a long time, a human skeleton. We have plastic model skeletons. But as I said, if I were you all, I honest to goodness, just take it one section at a time. The skull is a great section to learn because it's by far away the hardest, right? As far as the whatever. So, okay, we're going to do all of that in lab. I need 15 minutes. I really do. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to open, or somebody can open. Would somebody want the key to come in case it's on? And I'll be in there in just a minute. All right, in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes. Do y'all have any questions for me, though?